Illuminated Bible Story Book for Young People by Elizabeth Morton. Printed in the U.S.A., copyright 1927, published by the John C. WINSTON Company, Chicago, Philadelphia, Toronto. Includes 20 colored illustrations. Today's reading is How Gideon Chose His Soldiers. At last the children of Israel reached the promised land, but they still continued to do evil and to set up idols. They had forgotten about God's goodness to them and even built altars and offered sacrifices to Baal, the sun god. God was very much displeased with them and so left them to suffer for their sins. About this time they began to have some trouble with a people called the Midianites, who lived in the country east of Israel. For 7 years these robbers came just at the time of harvest with their flocks and herds and camped in Israel. Finally, the people of Israel had to flee from their homes and hide in dens and caves in the mountains, for the Midianites began to burn their houses and even steal their children for slaves. Then the Israelites were sorry and remembered God and prayed to him to save them, as he had done at other times when trouble came. And because God loved them, he heard their cry. Now at that time a young man named Gideon was threshing wheat inside the upper part of a winepress, so that he might not be seen by the Midianites. As he worked, an angel appeared and sat down under an oak tree nearby. And when Gideon looked up, behold, he saw the angel of the Lord standing before him. The angel then told Gideon that he had been chosen to deliver the Israelites from their enemies. Gideon did not feel that he was fit to do such a great work, but the angel encouraged him and cheered him. He told him that by God's help he would be able to smite the Midianites. So Gideon sent messengers to all parts of the land of Israel to call the soldiers together, and the people were so delighted to have a leader that 32,000 men answered the call. When Gideon's army had pitched camp, God spoke to the brave leader and told him he had too many soldiers. For he said, when the Midianites are defeated, your people will think that they conquered them through their own power. And I want them to see that it is as easy for God to save them with few men as with many. So he told Gideon to send home every man who was afraid to go into battle. Gideon obeyed the command of God, and 22,000 men left the camp and returned home. Still, God felt that 10,000 men were too many. He wanted fewer men than that. Then God commanded Gideon to take the men down to the river and watch how they drank. So in the morning Gideon called his 10,000 men and ordered them to march down to the river, just as if they were going to attack the Midianites. As they came to the water, most of them laid aside their weapons and knelt down at the water's edge and scooped up the water with both hands together like a cup. These men Gideon put in one company. But there were those who held their spears and shields in their right hands and lapped up the water from the other hand. God ordered Gideon to count these men who were watchful and who were ready for the enemy if one should suddenly appear, and to set them by themselves. When Gideon counted them, he found that there were only 300. But it was by these 300 men that Israel was to be saved. That night Gideon took these men and divided them into 3 companies, 100 men in each company. To each man he gave a trumpet and a lighted torch and an earthenware pitcher. They were to put the burning torches inside the pitchers so that the light could not be seen. So with the pitchers and torches, Gideon quietly led his 300 brave men down the mountain and placed them around the sleeping Midianite camp. There they waited and watched for the signal of their leader. Suddenly, at midnight, a great shout rang out, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" And every one of the Israelites broke his pitcher and raised his flaming torch and blew his trumpet, shouting, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" The Midianites were terrified when they heard the shouting, and saw the flaming torches and the swords flashing in the darkness. And so away they ran through the darkness, stumbling over one another, and trampling down one another, for they did not know friends from enemies. Away they fled across the Jordan toward their own land. After this, the Midianites did not trouble the Israelites any more. God delivered them and saved them by the hand of Gideon, as he had promised.